What's happening, guys? P back with you for another edition of the Music Box P podcast. Hope you guys are doing well. On today's episode, we'll continue our track. And today we're gonna look at the Modern Rock Tracks Milestones. So all the records, and I think this is something that I've talked about in the past, and something that's constantly changing and evolving. Just the records that have sort of taken away, which is now, of course, alternative, known as alternative airplay. All the records that currently stand, as it holds, because I'm huge into like stats where it comes to the chart, constantly updating the chart because I have a Word document saved on my desktop, so I'm constantly updating everything based upon what's out on the charts there. And there's like a Wikipedia article, make sure that that's updating, that sort of thing. So it's a whole little like statistician thing of sorts. But gonna take a look at all the records, how they're currently sold, because records are meant to be broken. They're constantly changing, ever evolving. Even as I record this podcast right now, there was some last minute changes that I had made, so I went and made them, and then so the records that I'm going to currently give you right now are as how they stand too. Of course, they always change, always evolve down the going further on down the road. But just as it stands right now, this is where the charts records currently stand. So let's begin with the artists with the most number one songs. Red Hot Chili Peppers are first with 15 number one hits. Second are Linkin Park with 14. In third place, Cage the Elephant and Green Day are tied with 13 number ones apiece, and Foo Fighters and 21 Pilots are tied for fourth with 12 number ones each. So this reflects 21 Pilots, who just went to number one with the Craving on the most recent alternative airplay chart. That was what had to be updated. So, of course, seeing modern bands, I'm not a huge 21 Pilots fan, but to see them move in the upper echelons along with Foo Fighters, Green Day, and the Chili Peppers and Linkin Park as well, too, it shows like the new blood that's creeping, because 21 Pilots starting getting traction. Well, they first debuted I think around 2014 or so. Cage the Elephant has been around since I think 2009. I think is when they first debuted. So seeing all these new millennial bands, if you want to call it that, it's gain notice, and to have so much success on the Modern Rock Tracks chart, and of course now alternative airplay chart. Seeing all that just shows that the sounds are ever evolving, ever changing. What's being defined as alternative is just completely off the rails in terms of where it was before, of like grunge, pop punk, new metal, that sort of thing. And just what's being discerned or described as alternative is not how I would describe it, and just the different genres, but there's nowhere else you can classify it to. And just sort of with streaming taking a hold now, it's sort of indicative of what's successful over on the streaming, because streaming has more of an influence on the alternative airplay chart, because there's not as many alternative radio stations out there, and streaming has a much more omnipresent methodology. So the alternative airplay chart is kind of similar how it collects all the numbers and all the streaming data versus so the Billboard Hot 100 and the alternative airplay chart are similar, are dead even in terms of the methodology and how the charts are tabulated each week, which I think is a good thing, because it just keeps everything on a level playing field, and you just sort of have a general idea, because there's not as much over in the Hot 100. Just more recently, just I mean, the record is constantly being broken in terms of like what's on Teddy Swims Lose Control is now over like 100 weeks on the chart too. It's absolutely mind blowing and astounding that record's been broken, and just more and more newer songs are being populated on the all time chart. So it just goes to show you how charts are meant to be broken. They change, and it's more reflective of the listener's music taste as well too. So next, I'm going to give you the artists with the most cumulative weeks at number one. Foo Fighters are number one with 95 weeks. Second are Red Hot Chili Peppers with 91. Third is Linkin Park with 84. Fourth is 21 Pilots with 78. Fifth is Green Day with 65. Sixth are Imagine Dragons at 55. Cage the Elephant are seventh with 49. Blink 182 are at number 8 with 48. Muse are at ninth with 46. And rounding out, the Black Keys at 10th with 44. So with the cumulative weeks at number one, it just, to spend the most total weeks at number one amongst all the songs that charted on the chart, it's pretty self-explanatory. And just, see, one thing I'm seeing, is that Red Hot Chili Peppers and Linkin Park are mostly at the top of, or at or near the top of most of these lists, and most of the major categories. I mean, sometimes I don't look at some of the other ones like longest reign to reach number one. I'm not really interested in that too. I just look at the basic nitty gritty, just like the most number ones, the most top 10 songs, that sort of thing. Um, Obviously, songs with the most weeks in the chart, most chart entries, most weeks. Everything just sort of boils down to it. It all comes down to a science. And seeing those artists too, I think Foo Fighters, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Linkin Park, and Green Day. If you had to make a Mount Rushmore of the artists that most represent the modern rock chart, I think you would pick those four artists, no question about it. Um, I mean, maybe you could say Blink-182, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, it just seems cliche to put Blink-182 on that list too. I mean, I love their early stuff, the later stuff not so much. But I think with those four, Chili Peppers, Foo Fighters, Linkin Park, and Green Day, that's the Mount Rushmore, the all-time artists in the history of the modern rock tracks chart. I mean, no question about it. Coming up next are the artists with the most top 10 songs. Foo Fighters are at number one with 32. Red Hot Chili Peppers and Green Day are tied for second with 28 top tens. Third are U2 with 23. Fourth are Linkin Park with 22. Pearl Jam and Weezer are tied for fifth with 21 top tens apiece. The Offspring and 21 Pilots are tied for sixth with 20 each. Cage the Elephant are seventh with 18. And at number eight, the Smashing Pumpkins, Muse, and Blink 182 are tied with 17 top tens apiece. So in this one, you could see that Foo Fighters own a record hold for the most top 10 songs and with the most cumulative weeks at number one. So to have the award for that too is pretty awesome and pretty special. But to see the breakdown of different artists too, and it's nice to see Pearl Jam on this list. One of the major '90s bands as well, and the Offspring too, who began hits in the '90s and been getting more traction with some of the more recent hits as well too. And of course, Smashing Pumpkins is another indicative of the '90s era rock too. So it's good to see that representation across different decades. You can kind of see the cross section and how everything has evolved since then, from where it was '90s and the more millennial rock in the 2000s as well. And see and U2, which first got noticed in the '80s as well too. So back to when the chart was started in '88, U2 is one of the first major acts to get huge early success in the early embryonic years of the chart. So to see this is just awesome, and of course, Weezer on there too as well. I love the Blue Album stuff. More recent stuff, not so much. So, continuing on, artists with the most chart entries. U2 are at number one with 44. Pearl Jam and Foo Fighters are tied for second with 42. Green Day are third with 40. Red Hot Chili Peppers are fourth with 37. Weezer and Linkin Park are tied for fifth with 34. Coldplay are sixth with 32. The Offspring are seventh with 31. Smashing Pumpkins are at eighth with 29. REM are at ninth with 26. And Blink 182 are at 10 with 25 chart entries. To see all, the total number of songs that chart in the chart. So again, these are based on songs that charted no matter where it ranked, whether it's number one, top 10, or just outside, or just somewhere in the top 40. Wherever they chart in the charts, this is sort of the total tabulation of number two. Not really stoked on seeing Coldplay on here, to be brutally honest with you, but just sort of the success they had just in early 2000s. That was sort of the prime year of Coldplay when they first came out with like Parachutes and all that. REM, it's great to see them on the list. They started like in the late '70s and just before the chart was even formed, and get all that success after the chart was launched in '88. It really is representative of just the college rock atmosphere, which is how sort of the modern rock track chart was formed just in response to what was being played on college radio. It was sort of the antithesis of just like top 40 then, because that's how the alternative chart got formed in the first place. Was just sort of the response just to counteract the aggression of mainstream radio. College rock just sort of and just all the college radio stations were playing all these alternative acts, and so modern rock track chart launched in '88, and that was sort of representative of that new wave sound and just everything that was out there too, the Britpop movement, everything, all that, and that's just where it started. Again, as I've said in the past, modern rock chart should have started much earlier in like '79 or '80, so that way all the different acts, Blondie, Talking Heads, oh god, the Ramones, just have all those acts just be representative of that too. Duran Duran, if they had started much earlier, all those songs would have charted. So we would have had "Hungry Like the Wolf" be like the number one song of 1982, Blondie's "Call Me" be the number one song of 1980. Just and to have that representation would have been awesome if it had started much earlier. So continuing on the list, this is the songs with the most weeks on the chart. All Time Low featuring Black Bear with Monsters are at number one with 88 weeks. Lovely the Band's Broken second with 76. Rise Against His Savior at third with 65. Cold War Kids first at number four with 64. Shades Trampoline fifth with 63. Arctic Monkeys Do I Want to Know at six with 58. Phoenix 1901 at 57. The Revivalists Wish I Knew You with 56 weeks. Foster the People Sit Next to Me with 55. Hosier's Too Sweet and Imagine Dragons Enemy are tied with 54 weeks on the chart. And Portugal Man's Feel It Still and Muse's Uprising are tied with 53 total weeks on the chart. So to see, All Time Low at the top of this list just really just warms my heart too, because All Time Low I've listened to like since the very beginning, since the So Wrong It's Right days, which came out in 2008. But to see him get success, especially, this is sort of indicative of sort of the pandemic era too. So just, when everything was on streaming, there wasn't that traditional way of just getting out and touring and everything. So now artists had to entirely rely on streaming just to keep people occupied till concerts were safe to resume. And to see All Time Low and Black Bear's Monsters get all the songs, and that was the number one song of 2021 also. So to see All Time Low get their flowers just really warms my heart. To have I think that's probably one of the more important records here that I'm reading off in the chart, along with like the most number one songs. I think this and the songs with the most weeks in the chart are the most important records on this chart, or the most important categories. But to see All Time Low top the chart just really warms my heart. Cold War Kids first, another great song. Arctic Monkeys, Do I Want to Know? Phoenix, 1901. The Revivalists, Wish I Knew You. Foster the People, Sit Next to Me. Portugal Man's Feel It Still. It's just awesome. Just hit after hit after hit, just on just what's being on here. And again, as I said before, records are meant to be broken, so this will change at some point in time. I think it's probably the most definitive list. I think a lot of these are frozen and locked in for some time to come. But to wrap things up, this is probably just like the creme de la creme, or like the Mac Daddy of like all the categories. The songs with the most weeks at number one, and this is one that was sort of kind of set in stone for I would say about like 15 years or so, where at this chart, the three songs that spent the most weeks at number one were Red Hot Chili Peppers' Scar Tissue, Stained It's Been a While, and Green Day's Boulevard of Broken Dreams at 16 weeks apiece. So that record was largely untouched for a good 15 years or so, until some of the more newer songs started coming on. So they were at number one. Now they're all the way down to number five. Of course, still, have, still being recognized as one of like the top five songs of all time, in my opinion too. And of course, the all-time list we'll talk about later in a future episode. But as it stands right now, songs with the most weeks at number one, Portugal The Man's Feel It Still and Blink-182's One More Time are tied for first place with 20 weeks apiece. Muse's Madness are second with 19. Foo Fighters, The Pretender, and All Time Low featuring Black Bear's Monsters are tied for third with 18 weeks apiece. Muse's Uprising is at fourth with 17. And at number five, of course, the aforementioned Red Hot Chili Peppers' Scar Tissue, Stained It's Been a While, Green Day's Boulevard of Broken Dreams, and Panic at the Disco's High Hopes are tied for fifth with 16 weeks apiece. So now you can sort of see, how things have sort of solidified right now to where it's going to be sort of untouched. I mean, you would like to sort of, kind of break up the tiebreakers of sorts too, but just, it's not meant to be. Again, something might come along and might, break it up too, but we'll see what happens. Again, it's just sort of, very fluid in all lists, and just seeing those songs on here, especially, All Time Low we talked about. But to have this sort of representation of just bands across different decades, and there was different philosophies, and just people had different musical tastes, and just they had needs back then. It was sort of fulfilled by these songs, and to see that sort of come alive with all these records on the chart, just it really is special. And just continue on with this. In one of the reasons why I love putting this together in the first place is just I love nerding out to these numbers and seeing how the charts are constantly evolving over time too. Because of course, if you look at the all-time list, you have Muse's Uprising, which is the number one song on the all-time chart. That was released on the 25th anniversary chart back in 2013. And again, in a future episode, we'll talk about that. I mean, we won't go all over all 100 songs, but just some highlights along the way. But it's just good to sort of see the breakdown and see how things have come along over the years too. And again, you never know what's come along down the pipe or around the corner, but just records are meant to be broken, and I think it's very special to see the representation of the different bands sort of take shape. But there's always constants that evolve, from the early embryonic years of the chart to now. Those bands have stayed the same, and the ones that charted the first are the ones that sort of, the old expression, the cream rises to the top. I can see, especially, with the Chili Peppers, Foo Fighters, Linkin Park, and Green Day, sort of the Mount Rushmore of those bands, just constantly, and still have, that dynamic presence, along with some newbies and the newcomers along the way. Just shows you, how prominent the chart is, and how big of a role it played, in alternative rock history. So, thanks once again for tuning into this edition of the Music Box P podcast. See you next week.